Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Enhancing Research and Discoverability of Primary Source Material from the British Library, which is sponsored by AM. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom panel of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version and where to access today's slides. And with that, we're ready to get started, so I will hand it over to B.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this really exciting topic. Actually, I'd firstly like to start by saying a huge thank you to Choice and Sabrina for the opportunity to discuss our partnership with the British Library and how we've been able to work together to enhance the discovery and access to a unique collection of India office records through digitisation. And thank you for the housekeeping as well. If we move on to the next slide, thank you. So my name is B. Kasim, and I am a senior product manager at AM. I have the unique opportunity to work within cross-functional teams to define the strategy for our software products and create functionality that aligns with the business goals and user needs as well, which I will talk about a little later on. At AM, we believe that at the heart of education is the freedom to think critically. Harnessing the latest technologies, we reimagine primary resources to empower current and future generations to challenge, analyze, and debate. AM's digital collections and technology platforms enrich the study, research, and teaching of primary resources with over 30 years of experience working with librarians, educators, and archivists. AM is inspired by archival materials and passionate about the technology that brings them to life. As you might already be able to see, we partner with libraries, archives, and heritage institutions to digitize the world's historical and cultural knowledge. So that's a very quick introduction to who we are and what we do at AM. We're delighted today to have Margaret Makepeace and Joe Gilling from the British Library joining us to talk about East India Company. And to kick us off, I'm going to hand straight over to Margaret to talk about the partnership between AM and the British Library.
Hello, I'm Margaret Makepeace. I'm lead curator for the East India Company records at the British Library. Sorry, go back to that slide. Two key parts of my job are telling people about this remarkable collection of records, often through posting on our Untold Lives blog and helping users to find the information that they need. The India Office records cover about 15 kilometres of shelving at the British Library's St Pancras building in London, and that's the largest collection of public records in the UK outside the National Archives. They comprise mainly records of, first, the East India Company 1599 to 1858, a commercial enterprise which was transformed into a sovereign power, controlling a large part of the Indian subcontinent. Second, the Board of Control, 1784 to 1858, a British government body set up to oversee the East India Company's political and military affairs. Third, the India Office, 1858 to 1947, a Department of State which took over from the East India Company after the upheaval of the Indian Rebellion. The records at the British Library are copy documents or correspondence sent to the London headquarters by overseas administrators, and papers created in London. There are large complementary archives in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other countries. At its outset, the company was more interested in the Spice Islands of Southeast Asia than in India, and it later developed trade with the Middle East. This slide shows the remarkable geographical sweep of the East India Company's overseas trading posts, settlements, and contacts. They cover the world from China and Japan across to Canada and the USA. The company records are also an important source for British history, and I'll just pause for a moment to let you look through the list. So moving on, here are some of the main broad subject areas which can be researched in the East India Company records. Commercial and cultural exchange, many aspects of history, including political, military, imperial, economic, maritime, London, social and family, science and technology, transport, medicine and public health, environment, climate, linguistics, ethnography, mapping, and the Indian diaspora. There's something for everyone. The East India Company evolved from a small enterprise run by a group of City of London merchants, which in 1600 was granted a royal charter conferring the monopoly of English trade in the whole of Asia and the Pacific. The company always operated from headquarters in the City of London, and by the early 18th century was based at East India House in Leadenhall Street, which was redeveloped and extended as shown on this slide. All company business was conducted in writing, hence a vast archive was created at East India House. These are the main series which have been digitised for the AM East India Company resource: charters, deeds, statutes and treaties, minutes of the Court of Directors and the Council of India, committee papers, correspondence, Board of Control records and factory records. The document on the slide comes from the IOR-A series. It records Charles II granting the island of Bombay to the East India Company on the 27th of March 1668. And here are some more examples of the great variety of records which have been digitised. The first documents come from IOR-B, the minutes of the East India Company Court of Directors in London, 1599 to 1858. These are records of core importance. They set down decisions made at the highest level concerning policy, procedure, and personnel. The minutes also note lesser matters referred by the court to the various committees which dealt with different aspects of the company administration. On the left is a page from the list of the first subscribers to the company, drawn up in September 1599. The Lord Mayor of London heads the list, followed by aldermen and members of the city livery companies. Differing amounts of money were pledged as investments in a proposed voyage to trade with the East Indies. The total pledge came to over £30,000, which will be the equivalent of approximately £4 million today. Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to the company on the 31st of December 1600. The page on the right shows the start of the Court of Directors minutes for the 8th of April 1663. The names of the directors in attendance are recorded, and then the decisions made about business. I chose this page because of the decoration with the drawing of a bird. This is not typical, but the work of a bored clerk who illuminated letters at the start of a few days' minutes before I guess he was told to stop wasting his time. As you might expect, we have enormous amounts of correspondence between Asia and London. Here is a letter from Robert Clive in February 1757, reporting on the military operations of the forces under his command. In June 1757, the victory of the East India Company at the Battle of Plassey led to the grant of the Diwani by Emperor Shah Alam II, meaning that the company were given the right to collect taxes in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. On the left is a letter written in 1614 by William Adams in Japan to the company in London. Adams is said to have been the first Englishman in Japan. He arrived there in 1600 on a Dutch ship. and became an advisor to the local ruler. Adams worked for both the Dutch and English East India Companies, who established factories, that is trading posts, in 1609 and 1613 at Hirado. The East India Company collection has a large number of letters from the English factory in Japan, which was closed in 1623. On the right is an example from the company's home correspondence. The series IOR-E1 contains many letters from company employees and their families, mostly in the form of petitions. These include requests from employees to be considered for promotion or to extend leave in England owing to illness, and submissions from relatives of employees who found themselves in financial distress. This is the petition for relief of Mary Wimbold from December 1764. Mary was the widow of Gail Wimbold, a former doorkeeper at East India House, who had served the company for more than 30 years. She was 64, in poor health, and unable to provide for herself. She was granted a pension of £10 a year. The East India Company's factory records in IORG are the commercial and administrative proceedings of overseas establishments in India, South and Southeast Asia, China and Japan, the Cape of Good Hope, Egypt and the Red Sea, Persia and the Persian Gulf, and St. Helena. Here is an example of a commercial document taken from the Persia factory records. In 1697, the company merchants stationed in Persia sent a letter with samples of silk thread attached, so that the directors could see which colours were currently available. One of the colours is described as water rat. You can see it highlighted at the top right of the slide. The silk samples make this document unique, and is one of my favourite items. The papers of the Board of Control include visual materials, as well as copies of administrative papers and correspondence. Here is a sketch map of the ferry between Bombay and Old Woman's Island. This is part of a file concerning proposals for erecting a causeway between Bombay Island and Colaba, including views of the European inhabitants of Colaba as to how it should be financed. And finally, here is a document for the India Office period. This is the instrument of abdication, one of 6 that Edward VIII signed at Fort Belvedere, Windsor Great Park, on the 10th of December 1936. The document is signed by the King and his 3 brothers. An Act of Parliament effected the King's abdication on the following day, ending a reign of less than a year. This copy was delivered to the Secretary of State for India by virtue of the King's position as Emperor of India. So I hope that has given you an insight into the treasure trove of AM's digitised East India Company records. Who knows how many untold stories are waiting to be discovered? And I'll now hand over to my colleague, Joe.
That's great. Thank you, Margaret. I'm Joe Gilling. I'm the licensing manager at the British Library. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Margaret there for giving us a really interesting insight into the content within East India Company archives. What I'm going to do is talk briefly a little bit more about our partnership with AM, the history of it and how it works and why it's so important to the library, and also talk a little bit on the practicalities of a digitisation project of this scale and what's involved behind the scenes in working on it. So the BL has been at the forefront of heritage image capture and digitisation for past 30, going on nearly 40 years now. On this slide, you can see a photo from the early 80s, I believe, showing one of our early photography setups, pre-digital era. We've come on a long way from there, but we remain committed today not only to the digital preservation of our collection by making facsimile copies, but also increasingly important to the world for digital dissemination of the knowledge that we are the curators of. So increasing our accessibility to our collections through digital platforms. Long gone are the days where you needed a letter of approval to even visit the library and consult the collection. Now anyone can arrive on the doorstep and get a library card and consult our collections. And what we're trying to do is replicate that for a digital age as well by actively trying to make as much of our content available online to one medium or another as is possible. That being said, our collection extent is now over 200 million items. I say over because it was 200 million the last time we counted, which was quite a while ago now. And indeed, the collection grows by approximately 12 linear kilometers of material every year. So with 200 million items to potentially digitize, this is a gargantuan task. It would take us, I think it's safe to say, potentially hundreds of years to do something on this scale to get all of that content available and online. It would be extraordinarily expensive, and it wouldn't be something the library would be able to undertake. And this is why partnerships with publishers like AM are so important to us, because they enable us to speed up this process and to rapidly increase our stockpile of digital assets. So to talk about a brief history of the partnership with AM, or Adam Matthew Digital as it was back then, began in 1990, not for digital projects, but collaborating on microfilm projects, reels of microfilm that were distributed to library institutions. I know it's 1990 because I checked our records this morning to look for the first contract, and that was the first one I could find. Fast forward to 2015, where the IOR Digitisation begins for East India Company. And this coincided with the installation of Adam Matthews' Digitisation Studio within our St. Pancras library site. This is a dedicated space that we outfitted with AM to include multiple digitisation scanning operations, as well as spaces for some conservation work, and also storage that we'll get a look at a bit later on as well. First module, and correct me, AM people on the call if I'm incorrect, was January 2017. It's been publishing since then. On the left, you can see some of the collection in its storage in the basement at St. Pancras. To talk about the digitisation process, as Margaret just outlined, the material on IOR dates from about the 17th century onwards. It is an extensive collection, a huge amount of material, and as you can see, some of it is in quite poor condition. And I think some of those examples there and the conditions shown within highlight not only the challenge posed for digitizing this material, but also highlights why it's so important for us to make these digital facsimiles of these items. This process gives us a high definition, color accurate record of this item, should it deteriorate further. It means we have that information captured somewhere else and backed up. And it means not only that, but that future users can access digital surrogates as the first port of call rather than access the physical item, therefore preventing potential further damage to the item through heavy usage. As part of this ongoing partnership, AM have arranged to have all of the items in the IOR series that are included in the project stabilized by professional conservation teams before they're digitized. Often this is a necessity anyway, because the material, as you can see, with loose bindings, with dog-eared pages, often there's water damage involved, sagging spines, very large fold-out items. That's often necessary in order to make it stable enough to digitize anyway, but there's also an element of preserving the items as we move through them as part of this process as well. And you can see some of the challenges posed to the actual capture of the images on the screen now, especially those sagging bindings. You can see these volumes, some of them are enormous, almost absurdly big bound books of material. You can imagine the challenges. I mean, they're not going to lie flat ever, really. They need to be cradled. And even so, in a V-shaped cradle device, they're still very challenging to capture a flat, stable image of some of these pages. On the left here, you can see some of the storage space within the AM studio, where we have a stockpile of items that have already been through conservation or are ready to go. This is essential in order to ensure a sustained output of images. It's a very high throughput. There are thousands of images captured every day, multiple tens of thousands captured on a weekly basis. And in order to ensure that there is no gap in production and that this keeps moving, we have to keep feeding those scanners with items that are ready to go. This means that on the BL side, we have to build up a reservoir of content that's ready to go straight onto the scanners, meaning that we have to work well in advance, well ahead of schedule, very closely with partners at AM to ensure that items are ready to go into the studio and ready to be captured. And you can see a particularly enormous example on the top right there of just how big some of these volumes are. We operate with our conservation team on a traffic light system, which is a sort of grading as items are reviewed, pre-digitisation. If it's green, it's ready to go in a stable condition that can go straight forward to the scanners to be captured. If it's yellow, it requires some conservation work and some checking, perhaps just to stabilize or some light repair work. And if it's red, that is a flag that there is significant multiple hours of conservation work need to go in before this is ready. That's how we operate, and that's how we build up that stockpile of material on those shelves ready to go into the scanners. You can see some images of the digitization process itself. Those are the V-shaped cradles that I mentioned previously. This is how the majority of this material is captured. On the right, you can see that not everything is suitable for one of these machines. There are substantial foldouts in these volumes. Often they're sort of clerical data. I guess the 17th century equivalent of a Excel spreadsheet. And like Excel spreadsheets, they can run on for quite some time, quite some distance. Not usually as long as that one on the right there. I think that was the longest we've captured to date. That is, I think, approaching 3 meters, if not longer. We had to book out a separate meeting room and prepare a floor space in order to capture this. You can see, if you look closely, the sort of floating tripod with the camera hovering above the item, and then move it down as we captured it in sequence. Thankfully, those are pretty rare, pretty few and far between, but it is a consideration with this sort of material that there are difficult to capture and oversized items. It might be worth mentioning that AM has a policy of including all of these. There's nothing excluded because it was difficult to capture. So to talk about then the importance of these partnerships to the library, it brings benefits not only, as I said, speeding up the process by which we are able to create our collection of digital assets that can be used within the library and can be used to preserve our collection items, but there are other benefits as well. So as well as getting these items digitized in the first instance, which, as I said, would be an extremely long process and something that would be very costly for the library to undertake and do ourselves, we wouldn't have been able to do a project on this scale without partnerships with Adam Matthew. We're able to conserve collection items. Again, this is something that we would have on our long list to do. We have our conservation studios working through collections, but there are changing priority lists, and with such a huge collection, it might have taken a much longer time to get around to doing that work on these items. Increasingly important with the rise of AI in recent years and with large language models operating and the usage of data to feed those models, optical character recognition and hand text recognition data, which is generated as part of our partnership. And I'm sure AM colleagues will talk about how that's implemented in the platform, but generating that data is also a huge asset to the library. What it does effectively is create a text file alongside the image. So the handwritten text on the one file can then be transferred into a computer form of that can be used and searched and has all sorts of applications for future research and scholarship. Equally important to us is the dissemination of BL collections to a global audience. It's a real asset of partnering with someone like AM is that they have an international reach. Their collections are used all over the world, and it means that British Library collections can make their way all over the world and can be accessed remotely from a global audience. We also have on-site access for all BL readers to the resource. So if someone comes to the library and gets a reader's ticket, they are able to consult East India Company archives within our reading rooms. So we are able to direct them, as I said, in the first instance to consult digital versions, meaning that we don't have to keep bringing out physical items. Something that's become increasingly important for us at the library over the last few years. Many of you will have noticed in the news that we had quite a severe cyber attack. We sustained quite a severe cyber attack, which made it very challenging for us to continue a lot of our online services in the short term. It was great comfort to us, and it was a great asset to us that so much of our BL material was available through partner platforms like AM's during that time. And finally, is the royalty revenue that comes back from these partnerships is funneled back into the collection and goes on in the future to help conserve and protect and ensure the safety of that collection for future generations as well. I thought I'd just finally finish there just to give you an oversight of just the staggering size of what we've accomplished through this partnership and just how many images have been captured as part of it and how many images are available now to scholars and researchers around the world for this really important collection. Okay, I think that's me done, so I'll hand over to B.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was a great overview of the partnership between the British Library and AM. As you've just heard, the East India Company resource holds an incredible amount of valuable information. And after so much hard work to digitize all of it, they do truly deserve to be published on a platform that can support users to benefit from all of its data. As of March 2025, East India Company lives on AM Quartex, which is our software platform built to enhance the discoverability of complex resources like this. I would love to spend the next few minutes talking to you about the benefits of hosting this resource on Quartex. And I think a really good place to start is by mentioning that the East India Company resource was initially created to be browsed by users, kind of going from document to document and seeing what catches their interest and discovering things that way. With that in mind, our legacy platform, White Label, was a great place to host it for the beginning of its lifetime. However, in the recent years, there has been a growing need for academics and researchers to discover content more freely. And that, coupled with the recent changes to accessibility criteria, which some of you might be aware of, we knew this was the right time to migrate this over to our newer technology, which is Quartex. So in the past few years, our goal at AM has been to provide a great experience for all of our users, which does mean making a commitment to provide a platform that is accessible to everyone. We continue to make accessibility improvements to AM Quartex, which results in our own wonderful resources like this becoming accessible to those with a diverse range of needs. We're constantly reviewing our platform against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA criteria, which is a mouthful. But that is notably the criteria referenced in the Americans with Disabilities Act and also the European Accessibility Act as well. And over the past few years, we've made considerable strides in a variety of areas, including usage of screen readers, keyboard navigation, captioning, and things like audio description as well. So accessibility is, rightfully such a hot topic around the world right now. And it's great to be able to showcase that we are moving in the right direction with that for resources like the East India Company. As well as accessibility, we are also committed to creating websites that are responsive on different types of devices. So from desktop to mobile to tablet devices. I think researchers more and more are moving away from using desktop computers for everything, especially to access information. And people are engaging in research in lots of different settings now. So we really want to ensure that anyone who wants to use this resource is able to do so without encountering blockers, regardless of whether they have access to a computer to kind of complete hours of research, or if they're simply reading one single document on their phone or looking for something really quickly, quite specific something. Once again, this is something we're kind of continuously making improvements to, and in order to ensure we support everyone accessing our resources, it's always going to be something we prioritize as well. I guess next, I would like to touch on a really exciting specific feature of Quartex, which Joe has touched on briefly as well. So once again, our mission of empowering new generations to discover and access data has driven various new features to be developed on the platform. And just one example of that is so important for the East India Company are the improvements we have made to our handwritten text recognition services, also referred to as HTR. And these are the services that enable us to take documents like this and generate accurate transcriptions for them. The transcription tool we use for handwritten documents actually advertises a 95% accuracy rate for English documents, which is incredibly valuable in aiding users to get accurate results. On the East India Company resource alone, we have run transcription on millions of pages of assets, which does inherently improve the search experience of users and the discoverability of these documents overall. My colleague Matt will actually demonstrate the importance of accurate transcription in keyword searching in a moment. And I think you'll be really impressed to see what Quartex can pull up. But as you can see just from this image alone, that getting accurate results for your word search immediately does kind of help you find the relevant information that you're looking for, both in terms of finding the document, but also highlighting the words on the page. So you can kind of quickly get to the right information without too much effort. In this screenshot, actually, I had searched the term London, which you can see on the right-hand side there, and I had navigated to this document. The yellow highlights on the image are where the word London has come up in the image, which immediately directs users to the relevant information that they're looking for by using the transcription of that image. As you can imagine, inaccurate transcriptions can lead to a false negative when people are searching for specific words or phrases. So it's really great that we can say Quartex makes the East India Company resource much more discoverable than ever. As you can imagine, this also does play quite widely into the accessibility of the document. So anyone with additional needs can still access this document, as a transcript can be read by screen readers, which the physical version of the document is obviously not quite as good for. I hope that has given you a very small taste of the exciting improvements our East India Company resource benefits from by being on Quartex. I will hand over to Matt now so he can share some further insights with you.
Thanks, Pete. Yes, so as the screen says, my name is Matt Brand. I am an editor at AM. So, yeah. So to just give you an introduction to what we've very recently just completed. So not only has the East India Company resource been moved to a new platform, but we've also added a further module. So module 7, as you may have seen from Joe's slide, 758 further volumes from Class F of the India Office Records, dating from 1828 to 1842, 570,000 pages, and covering a really key period in both the history of South Asia and also the British Empire. During this period, the East India Company loses its monopoly on trade between Britain and China under legislation passed by Parliament in 1833, and Module 7 covers the company's further transition, if that's the right word, into an organisation concerned largely with the functions of governance, collecting, taxation, military operations, really sort of moving away from being a trading concern. Each of these volumes is split up into collections, which are groups of papers on a given subject. These were sent from the East India Company's governing authorities in South Asia to the Border Control in London, which, as Margaret explained earlier, oversaw and scrutinised the company's operations on behalf of the British government. Between the 758 volumes, there are more than 5,000 such collections, and these cover a broad range of subjects. As the title of the module suggests, yep, many of these cover conflict and annexation, and also sort of the increasing governmental functions of the East India Company's administration. There are documents related to education, religion, legal reforms, the justice system, taxation, land ownership, construction of key infrastructure such as roads and canals, campaigns against the practice of sati, and the Thuggees, so the group of guys who would rob people on the roads. There's a lot of content on relationships with various polities in the region and their own internal politics. There's content on public health. There's content on banking regulations. The list really goes on and on and on. And the depth of the coverage is impressive, with sources covering almost every conceivable detail. They get very granular. They cover even quite often quite small settlements in South Asia. And one of the collections relating to the Thuggees is a copy of a pre-publication manuscript of a book by a guy called W.H. Sleeman. It's called the Ramayana, or A Vocabulary of the Peculiar Language Used by the Thugs, which the author felt fit to send to the governing authorities in Calcutta before publishing. So we've got this brilliant pre-publication manuscript, along with a covering letter explaining the work. Module 7 also brings new supporting content. So there are 2 new contextual essays, one from Dr. Rao of Jawaharlal Nehru University, which looks at the company's control over cultural exchange and its use of education as a political tool between the years 1757 and 1842, and a piece looking at the Thuggees by Dr. Mark Brown of the University of Sheffield and Dr. Ademaya Kenny of Birkbeck University of London. Both of those essays link back to key sources on these particular topics within the resource, offering new users and additional use into the archival materials available here, as well as some really key contextual information to the archival materials. There's also a searching guide, which provides new users with guidance on how to get the best out of the search functionality, which search terms they may want to consider using in different contexts, and also how to get the best out of document transcripts. We have added additional biographies of key government office holders to the resource. So again, more contextual information to users who may be new to this particular area of study, and a revised chronology. So again, further useful context to new users who may be looking at this area for the first time and may need just that little bit further information, who that person was, why, what happened when, and where it happened. So yeah, that's module 7. So if anyone has any questions about that, we'll be quite happy to answer them. So I think that moves us on to the demo. So this is the new, and dare I say, improved. It was already great, but I think even better now, East India Company. So just to start with the home page, and we do have a, I think, quite snazzy new banner. Obviously, if we browse down a bit, we've got jump links to a number of the contextual areas, just so you've got direct links to useful learning materials. So otherwise, though, much of the site structure remains the same. It's useful, it's familiar, but we have made a few additions. If we look in the introduction, we've got guidance on the research and teaching tools available. We have information on the selection criteria, so why certain series have been digitized of these papers by AM for East India Company. We have a new feature up here. We have the searching guide. So this is, I think, a really helpful thing to have. This is information on finding hidden narratives, the kind of language you will come across and how to work with that. There's guidance on finding people, places, events, different ways of going through the site. and guidance on searching in manuscript and printed documents. So there's guidance on how to get the best out of HTR and OCR transcripts that are available in this collection. I will just briefly move on to another rather wonderful feature. I'll just give it a moment to load, which is the chronology. So this, very much the same as before. Functionality is a little different, but it's still split up by era and by story. So if you want a bit of guidance on what happened when, that will be covered in these papers, then you can just quickly click on these and you can load all the same information. And this has been revised for the relaunch. So you will be able to get all the sorts of right information that you need. While that's loading, with apologies. Oh, there we are, my internet connection. Spoke a bit soon there. So we've got, your jump links to go down here. So this, I think, is a much quicker and slightly different way of browsing this information, but it's all still here. We have, if we return to this navigation bar, you'll notice that we've moved the thematic areas, so guides to the different era filters over to research tools. But otherwise, it's very much the same. One addition change, more accurately, is the government office holders. So what was previously known as the government structure chart. So it's now been simplified. So we've still got accounts of different people. We've still got their biography. We've still got their dates. So you can find out, say, who was Mughal Emperor at a certain time. You can filter that by date, and you can click there, and you can load all documents from their tenure. It is really quite simple. We've got these filters down here. So if we want to find out who was, say, for example, Governor General of India, let's go with that. Apply. And then this will give us all the Governor Generals. We'll have a nice little biography here, giving you some guidance on who they were. You've got their dates of their tenure. You've got their birth and death dates, where we have these available. And then you can just click there and load all documents from their period in office. So I think that's fantastic. It's really quick. In fact, if we were to open that, it's already loading our documents. How quick is that? Just a few seconds, if that. One of a minor change as well, we have reformatted the essays and video interviews. So Margaret's excellent essay introducing, sorry, I should apologize, Margaret and also Antonio Moon's excellent essay introducing the India Office records and their history. You'll notice there are 3 videos here. These used to be in the Nature and Scope page. So we have guidance on the digitisation project of the East India Company records, how the minute books and factory records work. These are all at the top. Introductions to some materials in module 5 as well, which is fantastic. We've got all this information up here. And then, where users might want guidance on all these different subject areas, these are now split up thematically. So it's just that little bit easier to find the information you want. And obviously you've got the same old essays, which are fantastic. They give guidance on so many of the key areas that you can research in this resource. Also citing and linking out to documents within. We've got 2 new additional essays for module 7, as you can see here. So one over cultural exchange and expansion for education, and another on long power and criminality, focusing on the Thuggees, if you'll excuse my pronunciation if that's wrong. So very much the same site. And in fact, if we were to go and browse documents, this page looks a bit different, but we've still got the same options. View documents. So view all documents, browse volumes by era, browse volumes by class. If we were to look at browse volumes by class, I know this will be familiar to a great many people, that we've still got the same options. Everything is still very much here. And in fact, if I were to open up IORE, then it goes straight to all the documents in IORE, all 1,658 of them. And in fact, maybe if we were to open up an individual document from here, so this is from the top of the list, this is original correspondence, volume 1, part 1, so some of the really important early correspondence to do with the operations of the East India Company. So I think the page now, obviously this used to be 2 pages, 1 page of all of these details, and then another page to click into to get the document images. You now go straight to it, and we've got the pagination drop down right here, so we can jump, excuse me for clicking the wrong thing, jump straight to folio 16. We can browse all of the different letters here, so This particular document has been split up by letter, so you can go straight to individual letters. Sometimes it's series letters by date. In this occasion, it is just letters, which is very nice and detailed. You can browse images, so if you're able to recognize, we want to go past this information on what's in here, we want to go straight to the correspondence, we can start clicking right on these and okay, I can see that's the back, that's got some information on that. Seal it, might have dockets. Alternatively, you can go onto the contents here, so you can go straight in to everything. Made by William Fitch on prices and trade prospects, we can go straight there. And you've got the details of that down here. So you've got the date of that document. You've got which folios it extends over. So that's fantastic. You've got so much information straight at your command. And if you want to view it alongside an index, you can just click right here. So this is all really quick. The new split screen viewer has essentially the same functionality as the old. It's much quicker. We can select the catalogue of original correspondences volume, and we've got information on individual letters. So that gives us information we need, and so we can actually browse. If we were to browse straight to stuff to do with that ship, we'll be able to find it in that list there. So that's really quick, and you'll be able to compare what's listed in that entry, what actually shows up in the document, which I think is fantastic, and it's so quick now. It's really, really impressive. I'm very happy with how this has turned out working. To return to the document details page, you can bookmark the document, you can bookmark the individual image. If you really want, you can add this document to your comparison list. So let's just click there. And if you want to compare, say, this particular image to another letter in this volume, you click Add to List again, and you can now load the same document up against each other. So say if you've got, I don't know, the draft and final versions of a letter in the same volume, or you want to compare one person's account of Surat, say William Finch's, with another person's account of what was going on in Surat in the early 17th century, we can do that. In fact, these are in very similar hands, so I wonder if they're actually parts of the same letter, or letter by the same person. You can compare different parts of it against itself, and you compare any two volumes. You could compare in outgoing correspondence, which we have quite often in draft from London, and the incoming replies from the East. So you've got the potential to say compare point 1 in the letter that was sent out against the reply to point 1 in the letter that was received, and you can see how someone's answering a question that's been given to them. So it's absolutely fantastic, this. You can bookmark, you can do all sorts, you can embed it. So if you want to copy this into a learning portal for students or colleagues to access, you can do that. Also got the download options, so we can download the transcripts of this page, we can download the full document in PDF form, which is, I should add, in much better quality than could be created in our old portal, which is absolutely fantastic. They're bigger files, but the quality is so much easier to read. You can download the metadata of the document as well, so there's all sorts of things you can do with it. But I think there's one thing I'd really like to show off, which is search. So previously, you couldn't search HTR transcripts at site level unless that term, which appears in the document text, is repeated in the metadata. So if you search pirate instantly, as well as being told I've got stuff about pirates and other AM resources, I'm straight into all of these. How fantastic is that? We've got 2,700 odd results, and it's a real range of documents that are down here. If I were just to run down the list, let's open up Board's Collections, volume 1398. Just a completely random selection. We'll start. We've got 49 hits in this volume. That's brilliant, isn't it? Piratical, so it looks for synonyms as well. How fantastic is that? And we've got all of these results down here. You know, pirates belonging to. You've got notes on what appears in different sections of the document. So the section we're currently in, we've got section notes describing that. So that will have been written by either the person who catalogued this collection or potentially a civil servant working for the India office. So you know that's really, really good data there. We wanted to look for individuals. So we can look for Robert Clive. There's one I made earlier, as you may have noticed. So that, again, very quick. And we've got 63 results. We've got entries from government office holders here, so you can find out who he's collaborating with, and you can go there and you can open links to documents from those people's periods in office. So we've got useful contextual information. We've got information about Robert Clive that we can find in other AM resources. And we can look through his career. I mean, this is currently filtered by relevance, so obviously it's number of hits. But if we were to say open up, you can open up dispatches from Bengal, original drafts, volume 1. We may even be able to open some of his some dispatches that mention him. So Robert Clive Esquire and Bengal. We've got the stuff that's being sent to him. Fantastic. So we're not just seeing stuff written by him, we can filter by date, sort by date as well. So data sending. We've got some early stuff here. If I were to open this letter book, and we can see, so this is pretty early on. We've entertained the following persons as writers in our service on your establishment. There's William Smith King, Robert Clive. So that could be, a really early entry relating to his career. You can go straight into this and you can start plotting people's careers. You can start plotting who they were working with, their contemporaries, Bankstrom Walsh, all these other chaps. Yeah, there's so much to find here.
Okay, great. Thanks so much to Margaret, Joe, Matt, and B. Looks like we have around 8 minutes for questions. So if you haven't submitted a question yet, feel free to do so in the Q&A. Okay, let's see. We had a question that Joe already started to answer, but there's a question on the slide called transcription, which was part of B's presentation. There's an all rights reserved copyright notice. So how does that work?
It's exactly as Joe said in his answer. The item has copyright restrictions attached to it by the British Library, and although people are able to look at it and use it in their own research, we essentially do not want anyone else publishing it further.
Got it. Okay, great. Let's see. We had a question that came in during Margaret's presentation about the, I think, William Adams document. Is Adams the inspiration for Shogun or John Blackthorne, the novel? And I think it's a show as well.
Yeah, I think that's the updated one, which I haven't seen, but the original Shogun volume, there was a novel by James Clavell, and yes, William Adams was the inspiration for that.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. We have a question. Is there any relationship with Indian institutions for use of digital copies? And this might be in regards to AM or the British Library.
I can comment from the library's perspective. We are very keen to establish partnerships. I assume this refers to access for Indian institutions for use of digital copies. yes, it's something we're increasingly interested in doing and increasingly considering as a requirement for partnerships is that we are able to communicate directly with the national institutions of subject countries that are within the documents and speak to them about and work with AM to try and get access for those institutions. AM colleagues might want to comment.
I was going to say, I think my understanding is that it's either the National Archives or the National Library in India does have access to everything. I believe we also have set up access for institutions in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and I believe also Myanmar, who
Right,
they
thanks.
have free access.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Okay, let's see. Do a question for Matt. What kind of guidance is there insight for users who may not have used these kinds of records before?
Sure. So it's quite a lot of guidance actually. Margaret's essay, which I mentioned in the presentation, is absolutely fantastic. Sort of gives guidance of what's in all of the different series, the history of the records, how they came together. There's also our Nature and Scope page, which details what's in each individual module, what kinds of documents are in each, and then also some of the highlights as well as some of the themes, geographical areas covered. There's also significant guidance on searching in the searching guide, as I mentioned. There's guidance on alternative spellings and different names given to different settlements on the alternative place names page. The essays in general and video interviews, all really valuable information on the records and give examples on how to use them in your research. So yeah, there's plenty of it. I think that a good place to start would probably be the teaching tools page, which gives guidance really on where you can go to find information out on a given subject or a given functionality.
Okay, great. Looks like we have a few more minutes left. Maybe Margaret, how can people discover more about the content of the digitized records?
Well, I think the essays on the site, I would suggest those. But the India Office Records curators are always happy to answer questions. And if anyone wanted to, perhaps I'll stick our email in the chat. We could give guidance about particular resource projects or resources, particular projects, or general reading. Histories and guides have been written about the records. So I'll put the email in the chat.
Great. Okay. Let's see. And looks like we have a few questions about the handwritten text transcription. So B, maybe could you talk about how HTT, how that system works?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our resources, which are heavy in handwritten text like this one, we use what's called an HTR tool. It's basically an AI-powered tool that can read and digitize handwriting from things like scanned documents, forms, or even old archives. What's cool about this tool is that it doesn't just look at letters individually. It actually understands entire words and how they fit into context. Which makes it much more accurate. Under the hood, it does use kind of deep learning and things like neural networks, which have been trained on tons of different handwriting styles and documents. So it's able to handle old style writing, cursive, and things like that. At AM, we've been using HTR tools to aid discovery for almost a decade. So it's really a great example of AI making a real difference in discovery. We did have a question about non-traditional letter forms. So is there room for submitting corrections? And there absolutely is. So when we run HTR on documents, they are checked by our colleagues and they are able to make any corrections as they see fit. Yeah, but as I said, the tool is pretty good at recognizing things like that generally.
Okay. Great. I think we're just about at time, but there are questions about seeing if your library has access to the materials. So is there website link or email that people can use to learn more about Access. Maybe we can put that in the chat. And in the meantime, I'll wrap up and say thanks so much to Margaret, Joe, B, and Matt for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording and where to access today's slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon in the near future on another session.
Thanks all.